Hey guys, so today our group will be discussing the topic on organizational culture. Although organizational culture may sound pretty self explanatory, culture in an organization can be very important to help develop these values that will distinguish one organization from another. Uh, the primary characteristics that can capture an organizational culture are innovation, attention to detail, outcome orientation, people orientation, team orientation, and aggressiveness and stability. The strong cultures in an organization can lead to lower turnover, more organizational commitment, and positive employee attitudes. We'll also take a look at formalization in this presentation, which is basically creating a structured set of policies and articulating them often for the employees to follow. High formalization can create orderliness, consistency, and predictability in the workplace for all employees. Formalization may not be seen in companies that have a strong culture already, because there's just not that much need for that type of management to be done. Although culture does seem to be a great thing for many organizations, there's definitely some liabilities that can come with it as well. Culture can really be a liability when the shared values don't align with the organization's overall values. It can become a liability when it supports biasness or becomes an issue with diversity. And it can also become an issue when there's barriers to success for like acquisitions or mergers that happen inside the workplace. For creating culture, it can be sustained by three major styles. So one way is it can be created through selection, which is just hiring employees that have the same values as the leaders or founders of the company. Socialization, which is the indoctrination of employees to like start thinking the same way that the founders and leaders did. And then the third way is role modeling, which basically the employees just start to follow their top manager's behavior at the workplace. Um, for That's how to create culture. Now there's transmitting culture, and that's just like basically how, um, you know, as you start to work there, and the culture keeps growing and growing. This is how you're gonna spread it, I guess. So there's four major ways to do this as well. There's stories, so it's just basically like narratives about the founding fathers, or like how it could be like a rags to riches success story, or like relocations, stuff within that same aspect. The second way is that there's rituals or routines. So just be like activities that can express and reinforce these key values of the organization. So I would say probably like if you guys were to have like an annual cookout or something like that for your company, or like I don't know, a beach day or something. Those are ways that can happen. The third way is material symbols. So these can convey to employees like who's important, um, what what are the organization's overall desires, and show like what behaviors I guess are kind of appropriate in the workplace, concerning like social behavior. And then the fourth way is language. Many organizations use some language to help members like identify with the culture, I guess, and help preserve it. So, for instance, a way that language could be a way to transmit culture would be like if we were to look at Chick-fil-A, they say my pleasure instead of thank you. I think that's one key way to know that like, oh yeah, they're a little bit different than any other company. But throughout this presentation, we're just going to keep discussing how culture can function in a workplace and how strong cultures in an organization can increase productivity. We'll also examine how to create culture in a workplace. And as we meet with as we meet with our interview person, Tawana, and look at some articles, we'll dig a little deeper into that. Thank you.
When it comes to the article portion of the podcast, there were a lot of directions we could have gone in, and we know that when it comes to establishing organizational culture, It can go a long way in being able to differentiate your company, run a successful business, and have satisfied employees and customers. So considering all of this, we ultimately decided to find an article that went over how organizational culture impacted employee satisfaction. Through many searches using peer-reviewed databases, we found an article titled "How Organizational Culture Influences Satisfaction of Employees," shown on the example of tourism businesses in Montenegro, and it was written by Olivera Simovic, Georgika Perovic, and Milicia Ricevic. And they go over what organizational culture is and the relationship between various organizational cultures and employee satisfaction. In this study, research was conducted using methods such as a standardized questionnaire, and more specifically, a questionnaire that asked directly about employee satisfaction. The study looked over 74 companies and 1,312 employees. From those employees, 634 were male and 678 were female, indicating that there was a good gender balance. There were various age groups ranging from as young as 25 and as old as 65 and up. The research question was, what type of organizational culture is dominant in Montenegrin tourism companies, and what is the impact on employee satisfaction? So after seeing all of this in the article, we felt like this was a good article that helped establish what we were trying to find. And through this study, it was found that a majority of employees were satisfied at 51%, and 37% said they were neither satisfied or dissatisfied. It was found that these companies practice organizational culture of clan, which means that they had an emphasis on interpersonal relationships, where being friendly, having mutual support, and teamwork are all highly valued. More importantly, the results showed that specific vectors of organizational culture had correlation with the most positive employee satisfaction. Sections such as teamwork, independence in business, security of employment, regularity of pay, possibility of professional development, and possibility of promotion were all significantly correlated with high employee satisfaction. The study found that organizational culture plays a massive role in employee satisfaction, and that should be no surprise. We found this article to be very important in showcasing how much organizational culture can make a difference in employees, and this is something that needs to be taken note of for future reference. Organizational culture has the potential to not only do a lot of good for the success of a company, but it can go a long way into producing positive relationships with employees. It is also important to establish yourself as a unique company to ensure that you stand out and leave a mark in people's minds. Through this research, we were able to confirm this and recommend many ways to establish good organizational culture, such as making people work in teams, having consistent pay, and letting it be known that the possibilities are endless at your company. While these are very successful methods, they are not the only ones. So it is possible that a company expand upon their company culture and find more ways to establish it in the workplace. Overall, after doing this research and reading these articles, we were able to determine that organizational culture is not only something that we think is helpful towards building a successful business and healthy relationships in the workplace, we believe that it is an absolute necessity. And for the next portion of the podcast, we will be getting into our interview with Tawana Jones.
Hello, my name is Will Ewell. I am a junior marketing major at the University of Dayton, and I'm here with Tawana Jones at the Montgomery County Economic Development. How you doing, Tawana?
I'm good, Will. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. So tell everyone, tell the listeners, so what position are you in?
So I am the Community and Economic Development Operations Manager for Montgomery County Community and Economic Development. And we are located at 451 West 3rd Street in downtown Dayton. And we are a department of Montgomery County.
So I know you're familiar with the organizational culture. So how do you define a positive organizational culture?
So I have been with Montgomery County for almost 25 years. And so I have seen different leadership people at the county, whether it's our county commissioners or our county administrator. Each one is different, has a different management style. So I think those things that make a positive organizational culture come back to having written policies. I think having policies and making sure that those policies are adhered to, that there is a mechanism for people to voice complaints. So we have a number of human resource departments at Montgomery County. We have a central HR department, and then some of our larger departments at the county have their own HR department, but they all are coordinated through central HR. So I think having those policies, making sure that you have good communication at all levels, so that if something is happening at the county and it's going from executive leadership down to directors, down to managers, making sure that frontline staff know what's going on so that they feel engaged as part of the organization. I think making sure that there are growth opportunities for people so they can advance and they have room to both elevate in their job career, but also in their income levels, I think is important. Being compensated fairly for the work that one does. And then I think making sure that employees at all levels feel like they are heard when they say something. So I think all of those things help create a positive organizational culture.
And especially within the government industry, there are a lot of policies that you have to follow and maintain. So that's a very big part of the organizational structure.
Yes.
So in what ways does your culture can be better implemented, not just in your organization, but in organizations throughout the world?
So, Will, you've been an intern for Montgomery County for a few months now. So you know that the county has about 4,400 employees. So many different job sites between like the county administration building, the sheriff's office, court buildings, Stillwater. So I think sometimes those organizations, the departments within the organization sometimes are siloed. People feel like they don't always know what's going on. So I think newsletters are always good, email blast for those people who maybe don't, who work for environmental services and they're in the field doing water and sewer type things, or they're working for solid waste, taking people's trash. I think if they're not looking at emails, then I think maybe you could mail something to their house. You create YouTube or social media, maybe even text things. So I think just making sure that you exhaust all the levels to make sure that people feel like they're communicated with from frontline all the way to executive. I think always maybe looking at if there's an issue that comes to light where a lot of people feel like they are not being heard. I mean, I think maybe looking at ad hoc committees that are representative of the organization. If you're looking at something that might have to do with diversity and inclusion, I think making sure that your committee, if you're looking at that, is diverse, but not necessarily of one race or gender or ethnicity, just to make sure that it's not just certain people who are opining about things. So.
Yeah, definitely with that many people, it's hard to keep that type of communication going.
Yeah. So I think we try. I mean, we have newsletters and there are blasts that go out from our communications team about things that are going on. We've seen a lot of communication around COVID. Back in 2019, when we had the tornadoes, there was a lot of communication that went out because some of our facilities were impacted. Maybe they lost power. And so I think always having that ability to communicate electronically is good. It seems like that's where we do most of our communication.
So what happens when there might be a fault in the organizational structure or a problem that someone has with how it's structured, and how would you manage that issue?
So, I think we always try to follow the chain of command where possible. So if I, as a manager, if I'm having an issue, my first point of contact would be my director. And then we have an HR department for our office where we would communicate with them about what's happening. You know, one of the things too is that we have a lot of union employees, people who are represented by different unions locally, and so they rely on their union steward if they feel like there's an issue that they need to address. Maybe it's about timekeeping, or maybe they feel like they're being asked to do something that's not in their job description. Then for the union folks, then they communicate with their union steward. For other people, we try to follow a chain of command and work with the department first, and then always make sure that that information is shared with human resources.
Sounds like you have good communication. So in the way that Montgomery County's economic development department is structured, are there any ways for employees like to express their own cultures?
So as far as religious cultures or
Religious, just any type of subculture group?
yes. Montgomery County has a fairly liberal vacation, holiday, personal leave policy. So we get a number of holidays that are more related to Christianity. For instance, we get Christmas off, but maybe not Good Friday as it relates to Easter. We don't recognize, for the most part, we follow a lot of the federal holidays. So if there is a Jewish holiday, it's not on our calendar, but employees would certainly not be discouraged from using one of their leave options, whether it's vacation or paid personal leave, to take that. We try to encourage diversity within the organization. So we haven't really been able to do it with COVID, but we might do a carry-in, and we might look at foods that are vegetarian or vegan, so that someone who doesn't eat meat, we could look at that culture. And in some cultures, you know, the eating of pork is taboo. So that sort of thing. We've had employees who have interned with us in the past who needed to pray during the work hours, and we have tried to establish a space where they could do that without being bothered during that time.
So yeah, smaller specific cultures that each employee may have may contribute to a bigger organization's main outlook and what they want, and that's good for Montgomery County as well.
It is, absolutely.
Cultures. So, what is your organization's values? What do they come in as? Looking at the point of view is, what do they value most? What do they look most in employees?
Give me just a second here. I had something I wanted to pull up. So we have 5 core values that we look at, and these are part of our performance evaluations. So those core values include innovation, and I'll go back and define them a little bit if you want me to, but innovation, stewardship, inclusion, professionalism, and collaboration. So with innovation, we are looking at creativity, new ideas, risk-taking, boldness, and continuous improvement mindset. So I think we're always looking at, you know, do we always do it like we've always done it, or do we look at doing things better, potentially, you know, work smarter, not harder sort of mentality. And then with stewardship, it's where we're looking at accountability and service, making sure that we're responsible and that we have informed decision making. A lot of the positions for Montgomery County are funded by taxpayers, and so we need to make sure that we are accountable for those resources, and that people feel like their taxes that they pay or the fees that they pay for service, like water, sewer, garbage, is good. Inclusion, we're looking at valuing the diversity of people, backgrounds, and ideas, and promoting equity so that all people have a sense of belonging. So the last two are professionalism and collaboration. So with professionalism, we're looking at being competent, having integrity, being civil and respectful in all interactions. And you've seen professionalism at play certainly with our building department, where people are coming in from all walks of life, all levels of knowledge on building, and how they are engaged with by our building team here locally. And then the final one is collaboration, making sure that we work with people, we share resources, we share knowledge, so that we are not working in a siloed or duplicative effort when we could all be working together. So those are five of the core values that Montgomery County looks at.
I see those all the time, every time when I'm working here as well, with you and Eric and Glenn. So how would you distinguish your organization's values from other similar organizations' values? Let's say, Greene County, like any of the surrounding counties that have those types of values. What distincts you from what they believe?
Well, I think for a lot of the counties, it's going to be similar values, because we're all making sure that taxpayer funds are expended wisely. For me, we receive a lot of grant funds that are coming from the federal government, and so we are trying to make sure that we are putting them into communities or into programs that are helping people be better, whether we're doing housing rehabilitation, or we're doing a business grant or loan, or we're doing street infrastructure type projects, just making sure that we are doing better. I think some of the difference in us and other counties is, we are the largest county in the area. So we have a lot more employees. And so sometimes our structure is very, there's a lot of people at the top, right? So we have 3 assistant county administrators, a county administrator, and then you have all these different directors who are over all of the departments. We might have more departments at our size than maybe some smaller counties. I think inevitably our values are pretty much the same. It really comes back to how we might be structured slightly different.
A lot of structure within Montgomery County as well.
There's a lot of structure.
Mm-hmm. So would you consider your organization to have a stronger culture, and how does it compare to formalization, which I talked to you about already? Just the difference between the balance in formalization and how culture plays a role in that.
Well, I think, as you said, we do have a strong culture, and I think that we have a lot of policies, and sometimes those policies create structure, and sometimes then you're trying to find space to play within those to make sure that you're building team, you're building rapport within your department. You're doing things so that you are not only happy when you're at your workplace, but then when you're out in the field and you're working with people, that they can see that you value and you're passionate about your job. And I think that makes us better employees when you have that. When people are not so engaged in their organization, and their job is just a job, just a job, and they're not seeing they're not seeing the fruits of their efforts sometimes, then it's tougher to want to come to work. It's tougher to feel like that you're making a difference. And ultimately, I think that's why we work in government, is so that we can show that we're making a difference. I was just going to go back and look at the formalization definition a little bit. I think we do have a lot of predictability within our department. We have some flexibility as far as like schedules right now. Some of it is COVID-19 related, but I think the general rule is as long as you're getting your 40 hours in, doesn't really matter how those hours are worked. But the general rule is most people work 8 to 5 in the organization. So I think that that creates some predictability and orderliness. That word is weird within the organization. So I think there's a lot of boundaries to play within. I think there's also some flexibility and adaptability that is allowed to make sure that people feel like they have work-life balance.
So does your organization, like, during the hiring process, how do you hire employees so that they feel and they have the same drive that the leaders have? So the upper three tiers that you said, how do they have the same characteristics and values how do you find out that they have those type of values? Because I know you do that as well. You hire employees. How do you know that they will perform the way that your organization's values expect them to perform?
Well, they don't always.
Yeah.
But here's how we try. So we have a standardized application process. It's through a website called NeoGov. So everybody who's applying for positions within Montgomery County, there might be a few exceptions at some of the elected officials levels where they hire people directly and they're at-will employees. But most everybody goes through an application process. They prepare the same application. If there are supplemental questions, they answer those. Some people do cover letters, some people do resumes, some of them do the application. We go through and we look for minimum qualifications, as it relates to the job classification and the position description. And we try to identify those people who meet the minimum qualifications and appear to be the right fit. We then do interviews with those people. So there's an interview panel. And so it gives us a chance to talk to them in person or via Zoom, the past year or so via Zoom. And then we score them and we come to a consensus scoring and we get a feel for whether or not they're the right fit for our department. So I'm only hiring for our department. So you usually get someone's best effort during an interview or during those first 90 days of performance, and we have probationary periods. So if they don't like us or we don't like them, then during that probationary period, you can terminate or they can quit, and it's fine. We try. So sometimes when people are working more frontline stuff, if they are the ones who are driving the trucks, they're going to have a totally different experience than maybe someone who is a professional staffer like myself or like other people in economic development. So I think you just want to make sure that you're hiring people who care about the job, who care about being part of a team. And you have the ability during that first 90 days, if it doesn't feel like you're a good fit, you can nip it in the bud right there. So
that goes along with the socialization patterns. So how do they maintain that? How do you have employees, especially newer employees, maintain those socialization patterns that have the leaders as well, which is based off the values that they share?
Well, I was looking at the diagram that you guys had provided.
Mm-hmm.
So we haven't done it much lately, but we always are looking to find ways that people at the county can share their experience. And we used to have lunches with the county administrator, and so there would be like people from different departments who would come in, they would sit with them, they would become more of a person, not just a suit or whatever. And they could talk, the county administrator could say, these are the things that we have going on right now in Montgomery County. And before you read about them, in the newspaper, or you see it on TV. Let me tell you, this is what's happening. And then people from the different departments would be able to talk about things that they do, or maybe problems that they see. And there maybe could be a lot of give and take, and just everybody becomes a little more human. Because 4,400 people, that's a lot of people, so you're not going to know everybody, but it gives you the opportunity to know a few more people better, and you get to know a few more people better, and so it just kind of builds upon itself. We're heavy on the food here, so I think we like to do carry-ins, we like to go to lunch. We try to build that socialization through that. So you get outside the workplace, and hopefully you can talk about things besides work, and you get to know people a little bit more, and it just builds a rapport. And with that rapport, you get people who maybe are going to be better employees because they're happier. They're happier. They feel engaged, and that what they're doing is important.
So, based on how it is set up, how do the leaders, or like the head, how do they are perceived as role models in what they do, and how do they, I guess, based on the other question, how do they implement themselves? It goes along with the socialization as well. So how do they socialize with people that are necessarily below them, but they work with and their employees, and how do they maintain a level of maintenance to make sure that they're all in the same playing field and they all can be heard?
Yeah. The first thing I would say, I think that a lot of people in leadership roles, they have walked the walk in the past, and so you don't just generally come in and you become a county administrator or director or manager. Oftentimes you have started with a lower level position, and maybe you've advanced throughout the organization, and so you have kind of that been there, done that philosophy, where you have experienced what people might be experiencing now. So I think there's the lived experience, and then I think the way that you become a role model is you show up. So you come to work, you have a strong work ethic, you get stuff done, you take responsibility, you're always looking for ways to improve. If there are opportunities in the community to volunteer for something, so that people see you, people who don't work for the county, who maybe have preconceived notions about how we are organized or how we are run, then those people get to know you more. And then I think that it's always important to remember that we are a pretty wide open building. There are some of our buildings that are very not walked down, but just more difficult to gain access to. Maybe the course building or the jail, there's certainly more requirements around that. But if someone comes into the county administration building and they want to talk to a commissioner or to the county administrator, well, they just walk right in. There's really no one stopping. There's not security detectors. And so I think that people have the ability to engage with people. And if the county administrator hears someone talking to them about something, then they can gather the information, but then they're going to have someone beneath them be the person who carries it out, who finds out, if there's a problem, what's the issue? How can we fix it? Is the person who has the issue, is it a valid concern, or is it really just a misunderstanding? So I think those sorts of things make people role models, and make them responsible individuals. And I think that's really what we're looking for, is people who are accountable.
That's a great way to have your whole workplace structured as well. It's just to be able to just walk through and be able to talk to whoever you want, and kind of just develops relationships a lot better. Because I walk into your office all the time,
Yeah.
I'm always in your office. And then the last question I have for you is, how is culture transmitted throughout the organization? whether it's through rituals, stories, symbols, and or language.
This one is probably one of the more interesting questions that you've asked me because, I think Montgomery County was established as a county back in the 1800s, maybe. So I don't know that we really talk about those sorts of things. Some of the things that we talk about is being the birthplace of innovation. It's on a lot of our business cards. It's on our letterhead. I think we want to make sure that people know that, lots of things were invented here in Montgomery County. A lot of those things were invented, well before we started working at the county. But I think those things are always good. I mean, we have our own county flag. We have our own logo. I don't know that we really have that many stories or language. I think it's more about our symbols and our rituals and routines. They're like we have Board of County Commission meetings. Those happen like every Tuesday, almost every Tuesday at 1:30. So people know that those meetings are happening and that if they want to attend those meetings, whether in person or online, they can do that. I think that the social media stuff that we're pushing out, I think most people want social media now. They don't necessarily respond in person to a lot of things. But I think being able to know that if they reach out, someone's going to communicate back with them. The transmitting culture, I think that is something that we're always evolving at Montgomery County, because I think sometimes we don't do a good job telling stories. Like I would say to you that our department, we're involved in trying to attract new business to Montgomery County or to retain those businesses that are here. What you hear about in the media is those large companies that maybe are looking to locate here or they're creating a lot of jobs. But when everything is said and done, it's really the small to medium-sized companies where most of your jobs are and where most of the growth occurs. And so I think making sure that people know that story about what economic development does and how we are working with those people. Or when you're looking at building departments and telling the story about people who have been able to recover from the tornadoes, or looking at, I think probably our story and how we transmit things is less about culture, but more about those programs or those activities that we have that help people. So a lot of people don't like to come in and pay their taxes. So how do we make that process be as streamlined and efficient as possible so that it becomes a little less arduous to do? So paying online, not having fees associated with that, I think is important. People don't like when their property values go up because that impacts the amount of taxes they pay. But knowing that so much of that money goes to pay for social services and law enforcement and to care for those people maybe at Stillwater Center who don't have anybody else to care for them. So I think just making sure that we tell people what the value of the dollar is and how we really try to impact the county as a whole with all the resources that we have.
Look good as well, just as the county, so that, especially as you were saying with the taxes, just having stories to say and being able to entice people to pay their taxes, tell them what they do, tell them what it goes towards. It's pretty big as well. Well, it sounds like you guys have a great culture there, great organization. I mean, I know a little bit about it as well. So
right.
Yeah. It was great talking to you. Got anything else? Pat?
I don't think I have anything right now, but in the event that, you need to circle back, follow up with anything after our conversation today, I'm more than happy to share anything that we have. We do have some policies and procedures I'd really like to share with you. I think they might be useful to you. So I'll get those to you. And if you need to follow up, I'm here. Okay.
Sounds great. Great talking to you, Tawana.
All right. Thanks, Will.
So we just heard from Tawana Jones, from the Montgomery County Community Development, who talked to us about the organizational culture that she has experienced throughout her career. She talked to us about the importance of policies in her eyes to create positive organizational culture, as well as the importance of communication. She was stressing on the importance of making sure that everyone has the ability to be heard, and especially in larger organizations, as well as between the different levels of the organization. She highlighted newsletters and email blasts as a way of communicating with all members of the organization and making sure that the mode of communication with all members is well thought out so that everyone will be able to hear the message that you want portrayed. She also talked about following the chain of command and the use of union protection in order to effectively communicate. If people feel like there's something that needs to be changed, they can, go to their union director and they would be able to communicate back to the organization some things that employees are feeling would be beneficial to change. Diversity encouragement regarding, religious holidays or personal values, she said was also taken into consideration at Montgomery County. And that's something that really allows their employees to feel like they're cared about, which could lead to a better retention rate. If you make your employees happy, they're more likely to stay with your organization. She also went into the core values. Will asked, what the core values are that Montgomery County, values. And she highlighted innovation, stewardship, inclusion, professionalism, and collaboration. And these are addressed as their core values. And these values lead to a better shared culture that the organization is trying to accomplish. And, when these are taken into account when hiring employees, because they're trying to make sure that that culture isn't going to be lost by hiring people that don't really fit into their specified categories that they're looking for. And this allows for the organization to flow more efficiently because everyone has the same goals in mind and everyone knows what those goals are. And, the values lead to culture and structure. Values lead to culture, and then structure and policies are a route to get to that desired end goal. Predictability and orderliness were also highlighted, as well as making sure that employees are able to have a healthy work-life balance, just to make sure that the employees feel valued and cared for. Tawana also told us about how during the hiring process, they make sure at first that people have the minimum qualifications that they would need before they offer an interview to the potential employee. And then she also talked about how during the interview, there's an interview panel that scores the potential employees, and they also try and just get a feel for if they would be a right fit in the organization. And then she also went into creating shared experiences for employees that bring together people of, say, different departments or different levels of employment, that allow, as she said, employees to see past the suits and get to know each other as human beings. And that sort of allows you to lead to better camaraderie and allows for more connections to be made throughout the organization. She said that people that are happier at work tend to become better employees and they become more motivated. And then she also talked about how when it comes to upper level executives or upper level managers, she said that they've walked the walk in the past and they understand the perspective of, say, the lower level employees. And this allows for some level of respect to be formed on both sides of the relationship. So they're able to still keep that structure. And then she told us about how the motto is the birthplace of innovation, and that's something that as an organization they're trying to push to outsiders and the message that they want to portray, and that's who they want to be seen as, which is important because that sort of leads into the culture that you're trying to create for your organization. So we really want to thank Tawana for the opportunity to talk with her and get a better insight into the organizational culture that she's been a part of and that she's currently a part of. I think that we all learned something new about how organizations go about creating that culture that they want to establish and how they manage to keep that culture alive. So thank you again, Tawana. We really appreciate you giving us your time, and we also want to thank you listeners for listening. We hope that you learned something new today and that you enjoyed your time with us.